Hello, nonprofit leaders. I'm Sarah Olivieri, your host, and this podcast is here to assist people like you, executive directors, board members, and other nonprofit leaders make a bigger impact with insights, tips, and lessons learned from nonprofit leaders and experts. Having been an executive director, a board member, and now a consultant and coach, I truly understand the challenges you face. And that's why I'm here. I'm all about working smarter, not harder, so you can make a bigger impact without the burnout. And so is our sponsor, DonorBox. DonorBox isn't just a suite of helpful fundraising tools, it's a partner that helps you raise more money and supports you in retaining your donors. I love their forward-thinking approach. Visit donorbox.org to learn more. And don't forget to sign up for the Inspired Nonprofit Leadership newsletter, where you'll get bite-sized, actionable tips just for nonprofit leaders like you, delivered weekly to your inbox. Sign up at inspirednonprofitleadership.com/sign up. Okay, let's dive into today's episode. My guest for this episode is Scott Burgmeyer, who is the co-founder of Become More Group. We had his partner Tammy on in an earlier episode. You should definitely go check out this episode. But I wanted to have Scott join us as well because he has such a wealth of knowledge and expertise to share when it comes to leadership. He has a PhD in organizational development and leadership. He has a master's in business administration, organizational leadership. And he is the recipient of the Iowa Recognition of Performance Excellence, not one, not twice, not 3 times, but 7 times. And he won the Bridgestone CEO Award. Welcome, Scott. Before we dive into professional advice, would you tell us a little bit about yourself personally to round you out as a whole person?
Yeah, absolutely. I was sharing a little bit ago that we've recently moved from Iowa to Texas. And my wife has an amazing job opportunity there. And so we made this move a few months ago, and I've learned 2 things about myself. One is we have a larger piece of property that we haven't had a property really that size before. And so I'm learning to be farmer me. And so that's a lot more fun than I thought it would be, or at least right now. The other thing I've learned about myself is when I've come back to Iowa to visit and, it's -2 out, I have become a Texan very quickly. I don't like -2.
I feel you on that. I do not like to be cold. When I have to go in the cold, which I do because I live in New York State, I've learned finally to dress warmly.
Yeah.
But I have to say, I learned this silly thing recently about myself. I always put on like warmer sweaters, warmer tops. And I recently realized that it's my legs, that if I get my legs warm enough, then the rest of me is good. So now I'm like, okay, I'm getting those like super fleece Sherpa lined leggings. And now I'm so much happier in the cold weather. Well, let's dive into things leadership. And I want to ask you, as I've interviewed a lot of people about leadership, but what makes a great leader from your perspective? What are those key things?
Yeah, I think it is interesting when you think about leadership, and I've always thought about a leader as what is their primary role. So whether or not you're a giant Fortune 500 company, you're a small nonprofit, or a right-sized nonprofit, whatever that is, there's just some basic fundamental things that a leader has a responsibility for. One is, okay, we have to be really clear on what are we trying to accomplish and why are we trying to accomplish that, whether that's the mission or a specific strategy or something with our customers or the people you serve. And then the second thing is, am I developing and growing people who can execute on whatever you're trying to accomplish? And so many times, my experience is leaders focus on, we're trying to accomplish this thing, and they're so focused on accomplishing the thing versus how am I growing the team and the people around me so that the thing gets accomplished. because truly an organization will only grow as much as their leader can. The leader is really going to be the limiting factor. And so if you're not growing the people around you, that means you're not growing yourself, which is like a little bit a piece of humble pie sometimes.
Yeah,
When
totally.
you think about it.
And I love when I think about leaders who, are trying to do it all themselves, which is often the case with founders or leaders of highly understaffed nonprofits. I like to think about this word organization, right? We have an organization because we're trying to do something that's more than one person can do, right? If one person could just do it, we wouldn't need an organization. They could just do it, right? So I like to think about like the whole reason why we would be in a nonprofit or a business or anything we'd call an organization is because it's bigger than we can do by ourselves. And you have to switch from like expert doer to grower of people. It's really key.
Yeah.
So what do you see are some of those, inside those two things, or expanding more if you want? Where do you see many leaders struggle?
Yeah, I believe the couple things that leaders struggle with the most is, are they clear on what we need to accomplish and why? And they get so focused on how that they're people will feel micromanaged or feel like, well, you don't trust me and you don't, and so we get so into, well, that's not how I would do it, so I'm just going to do it myself, right? All of that challenge that they have. I think the other thing which can be difficult is, am I holding people appropriately accountable? So, the thing that, it's one of the least said topics in business is, hey, that's not good enough.
Yeah.
And it's really, so sometimes people will say, oh my gosh, you're really harsh. Okay. The other personal thing I'll share, yes, I can be harsh. I do not intend to be harsh. And so I have to be, kind of a kindler, gentler me. And it's not about a beat down. It's not about, hey, let's make them feel bad. Let's, be condescending. It's saying, no, are you, excuse me, are you working to your potential? And if you're not working to your potential, or you're not delivering what the customer or the client or the organization needs, then we need to understand what's preventing that. And it's okay to have that conversation and make that feedback normal so that we can all grow. And so many times leaders are holding that back, or they're like, oh, I'll take it and I'll correct it and I'm going to be frustrated. And then I go vent to my spouse or, the kids, or, kick the dog at home or whatever you do. Instead of addressing the real issue by having that conversation and having that difficult conversation.
So what kinds of things do you say to leaders who you're working with who need to have that conversation? I know for me, because I've done this, this comes up, right? Again and again. You have underperforming team members, and either you need to get them performing, or you need to, as I say, like compassionately let them go.
Yeah.
But there's a discovery moment in there. And one of the things I found is I just give leaders like, do you need me to like spoon feed you the words? Because the first time, the second time is so hard. But what do you find helps leaders get starting it? Because I think we probably both know, like, once you get used to it, it's not hard anymore. But it's those initial times is so challenging.
The first time you do it, I mean, I can remember I worked for a tech company growing, and I had a number of leaders who I learned, number one, had never had that conversation, and they had never had to fire anyone ever. And they've been leaders 10 years. And I'm like, okay, again, goal isn't to fire people. The goal is to have them grow and be, productive people in the organization. So we usually talk about, if you're going to have this conversation, there's actually a handful of steps to give this feedback. Okay, so the first thing you have to do is you have to recognize that we're not quite where we need to be. Then you need to say, okay, name the action or the behavior. What's the impact? This is a decision point. So the impact, if you can't name an organizational impact, then you don't have the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Then it's a personal pet peeve or something, and as a leader, you kind of got to get over that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can you give us some examples of things that you've had to tell leaders you got to get over that?
Yeah. My favorite one is that person has a pink Christmas tree, and that, like, I think they should take that down. Well, and I told the owner of the company, I mean, that's fine. Are you going to have everyone take their Christmas trees down?
Yeah.
Well, no, just the pink ones. No, like, you got to get over that.
You got to get over it. I have that in my own business. I teaching high level strategy, strategic thinking, coaching leaders. When I get a leader who is so distracted by a typo or a spelling mistake that they can't no longer take in the information and they just feel like they have to focus on that typo, I'm like that you need to learn to let those things go. Yes. Because this typo is not changing the meaning of the lesson. And, that is something, and I've seen, I have quite a few leaders, especially older leaders come through and they were unfortunately trained that, spelling is so important. But spelling is not more important than strategy.
Yes.
And you got to keep that in focus. But I love the Christmas tree example. In fact, if I look at some of my old videos, I used to have my Christmas tree in my background, or it was where I filmed my stuff was in my living room. And I mean, I had my Christmas tree up past Valentine's Day once. It became such a joke. And I'm sure there are people who are like, what are you doing with your Christmas tree still up? But whatever. Yeah. I was busy helping nonprofits and enjoying my Christmas tree. So why not?
Yeah, that's okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, and so I think, as we think about this, it's did I recognize the behavior, the name, the item, what's the impact? If there's an impact, then I go and I have the conversation, and it's saying, okay, here's the thing, here's the impact.
Yeah.
Here's why it's a problem. Here's what it needs to be differently. And then really the fifth thing is a consequence. And there's a decision there again, like, if they're still learning, it's the first time you've had the conversation, I'm not going to talk consequence. Right. I'm just going to say, hey, this isn't good enough, and you did this, and here was the impact. Like, it cost us an extra $1,000 to do this because you were late, and like, you can't be, you need to be on time because we can't afford to spend an extra $1,000 to ship this rush or whatever that is.
Yeah.
If now I'm having that conversation a second time, a third time, a fourth, then I'm going to lay in that consequence to say, the most successful accounts payable, the most successful shipping clerk, whatever the role is one who does this. And I really want that to be you. And I loved what you said earlier. Sometimes you need to support them to find their happiness elsewhere.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or vote them off the island. And it's never something we want leaders to take lightly.
Mm-hmm.
It is a decision to say, are you going to continue allowing that behavior or action or not meeting the line?
Yeah.
Because it's holding you back.
Yeah. I used to work when I was working in nonprofits in the autism space, where if you've been in the autism world, you've probably run across ABA, applied behavior. Oh, I forget what the other A stands for. Anyway, but I often tell leaders, like, we want to bring behaviors that are an issue to our staff's attention. And if they're like, yes, I'm up for changing my behavior, or they just change their behavior, awesome, once we shine a light on what we're looking for. But at the end of the day, it is not our job as leaders to be behavior modification therapists. And ultimately, if our staff don't want to change their behavior or are like actually incapable of changing their behavior to something that works well with our team and that, intent, what do we need, what the impacts we need to achieve are, then you need to let them go. And I see, on that other end of like people staying too long, they're trying to change somebody's behavior who does not want to change their behavior. And to me, that's like one of those kind of like, this one's a deal breaker. And clearly they're not happy, right? Someone's not going to be happy working in a place where they can't behave the way they basically want to.
And I think there's this element of, in my experience, when I have those conversations early and often, people appreciate it because many times it's like, oh, I didn't even know. And many times I use the analogy of like broccoli in the teeth. You're at dinner with your friend and you have broccoli in your teeth, and you're having this conversation and your friend says, oh, hey, by the way, you got this whole floret of broccoli in your teeth. Oh, thanks. Oh, yeah. I've been meaning to tell you for the last half hour, but I just couldn't figure out how to tell you. Thanks. Employees will feel this way too. Like, sometimes it is just like, hey, this is creating this problem. And they're like, I didn't even know. I had no idea. Like, I didn't fully understand the context. The secondary part of that, as a leader, you cannot afford to have multiple projects for the organization and then all these people projects trying to just get them to perform at some minimum line. If you want to be the best leader or the best organization, and you think of most people's missions and visions are, we want to be the best at.
Right.
And well, how are you going to be the best at if you're spending so much time focused on correcting behavior, getting people just, to get the basics done? That means you're going to be really good at the basics.
Yes. And it's going to impact your mission. I mean, I often talk about for nonprofits, they can't afford to sacrifice quality. And if it's something really important that's time sensitive, like people's health, people's, ability to live, they also can't afford to be slow. And do you know that triangle, like slow, fast, and no, not slow, fast. You can be fast, cheap, and what's the third, right? So it's like
and quality,
quality, right? So if you are going to have high quality and you're going to be fast, which then you cannot be cheap. You have to spend. And I was literally just having this conversation with a client 2 days ago about how she needs to hire to replace somebody. And I was like, be very, very careful that you don't price this position too low, essentially, right? Because you will not, if you need somebody who can be pretty much do this job on their own. You need a project manager type person, and you're not going to get that person for $18 or $20 an hour, because people who are at that level, they need more, they're worth more money, and you might as well not hire anybody if you're going to be stuck, if you're too cheap about it, basically, and you hire somebody where you have to do all the work. So even though this wasn't like, we're kind of going into like, do you keep your person? I love this conversation. So I'd love to think about, how do you advise people around, those who are in hiring positions, around how they think about, when they're letting somebody go, how do they think about their next hire? And what are some of those steps that they should be thinking through as they're like, oh, I do need to let somebody go?
Yeah. And I think there's a couple things. One is the reality that you're going to pay for it or you're going to pay for it. So you're either going to pay for the skill and you're going to maybe pay a little higher price to buy that skill or hire that skill. Or you're going to say, you know what, I'm going to hire this person and I'm going to grow them into that skill. Either way, you're paying for it. My experience, it becomes almost a wash, because the opportunity that you miss in the time you're growing that person, you've probably could have recouped by just hiring that a little bit higher priced.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think the second thing is looking at the role.
I just want to go back to that for 1 second because I want to, for those small nonprofit leaders, I just want to say that says to me, if you don't have a lot of reserves, you should pay for the additional expertise up front. If you do have a lot of
Totally.
reserves of time and money, then and you want to bring people along, by all means, bring somebody along
Yeah.
and pay for it that way.
And it's a decision.
Yeah.
And it's not saying one decision is right or wrong. It's just saying which decision is going to allow you to get closer to your mission.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's okay. It's just, are you making that decision on purpose, or are you making it because, of one point in time, dollars and cents?
Yeah. Yeah. It's great advice.
I think then, so, okay, there's that decision.
Yep.
Then there's the designing the role to say, what do I need and what will this role be 6 months, 12 months, 18 months from now? How will that role fit into our organization 6, 12, 18 months from now? Because the other reality is, okay, I go post a position, and I go through the hiring process. You're probably talking 3 to 4 weeks at best.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. And then there's probably 60, 90 days before they're really kind of starting to be somewhat productive. It's probably more like 6 months.
Yeah.
So if you're like, here's what I need today and I'm hiring for today, by the time that person is kind of up to speed, it's 6 months later. And if your organization is going through evolution and growth, or whatever it is, you've now hired the wrong person.
Yeah. Yeah. So what do you recommend people do to help get the right person?
Yeah, so it really is, okay, what do I see this role 6, 12, 18 months from now? Okay, here's what that skill set is. And then we would talk about it in 3 ways. Okay, so one is the briefcase. What skill sets, knowledge, skills, abilities do they need? So you mentioned project manager before. Do they have project management experience? How much does that need to be? That's really pretty easy to verify. Like, I can look at reference, I can look at their resume, Okay, I need to look at their heart. Are they aligned with our mission and our values? So are they going to fit in with our culture? And so that's kind of the soft or the core things that you need. And then the other thing is the head. So it really is behaviorally. How will they naturally kind of behave? Are they more talkative? Are they more quiet? Are they more dominant? Are they more collaborative? Are they do they want fast-paced environment, or is it more, no, I want to be a little more slow, methodical? And actually, when you look at it, you can start to map what are those tendencies. And if what the research says, if I match briefcase, heart, and head, I'm 85 to 90% likely that person will be successful and will stay with the organization.
Yeah, yeah.
And many times we look and oh, they're a project manager. They've done this for 3 years. Therefore, magically, they're great. I'm thinking of a client who they went through 3 project managers in less than 6 months, and they almost lost a $10 million grant.
Oof. Yeah.
Because they were hiring what was easy versus what was right.
Yeah. That's so important, because I almost think the skills are important, but to me, that's the last thing, because if they don't have the head and the heart, it's a no-go. They could be the most skilled person on the face of the planet, but if they're not aligned in those other ways, it's not going to work. And just because I think too, there's another piece in there, when I say project manager type, they haven't always had the project manager job title, right? So I think you got to look at, what types of activities do you need them to be good at? and then think about, how are you going to interview or how are you going to put in your description?
Yes.
Don't just take don't take that easy route out and just say, oh, they've been a project manager, because who knows what that really meant. And there's so many, it makes me think I have a friend who wants to change jobs, and I keep telling her, like, you're perfect for like an ops person or a project manager person. What she's actually been doing for like the past decade is she is kind of like the traveling manager for a professional mountain bike team. She coordinates all the hotels and the Airbnbs, all the meals. She deals with sick team members. She coordinates the entire team traveling around the world every year. That is a ton of logistics. Like, I was like, you would be a great project manager. You would be a great ops person. And even in her head, she's like, oh, well, I've never done that job. I'm like, believe me, you can do it. If you can take a team of people around the world and managing all those logistics, you got any types of those jobs covered easily. And I'd say the clincher for her, which makes her such a good hire in that type of role, because I know a lot of executive directors who need to hire that type of role, is her standard of excellence is really high. She's always going, she's always the person with the highest standards on the team. And they are not based on what the company says need to be happen. She's driven by her own kind of standards of how it needs to be right. And those things, I think, are things you can find out in an interview.
Absolutely. Yeah, and we would highly recommend that, you're doing the interview and you're being really thoughtful about the interview. And then you use some sort of assessment for the head and behavior part.
Yeah.
And again, it's not saying, oh, the assessment is going to tell me everything. No, it's one piece of data.
Yeah.
And your interview is one piece of data. And references are one piece of data. And then it's looking at those pieces of data to say, what's the best hire for what I need? And will they be successful? And it's okay to make a decision to say, you know what, they don't quite have the skill set we need. I'm willing to grow it. Great. Then you have to invest the time and effort and energy and dollars and cents, if it's like they have to go get an education of something, to actually do the growth. Because again, if you don't, you've made the decision to set them up for failure.
Yeah, absolutely. You've got to commit to that, and you've got to commit to the onboarding. Whatever's it sounds to me, I think, what I'm hearing is that onboarding length really kind of depends on the hire, right? And
It
what
does.
you chose to go with, and the nature of the role. I mean, some roles have a lot of small moving parts that, or maybe you weren't that organized and it's hard for somebody to discover all this stuff. Because I hear I'm asking that because I hear a lot of people ask, like, well, how long should I plan on for like onboarding? And there isn't really an easy answer for that, is there?
Yeah, there's not. And part of that is part of that depends. What is your definition of onboarding?
Right.
And, when we onboard someone at our organization, I can tell you the first 3 days we are one-on-one talking about, here's what we do in the organization. What's the mission? What are our values? What does that mean? And we're building relationship. We're really not even focused on any kind of work training.
Yeah, that's great.
It's really talking about, what are the norms? What are our communication norms?
And
is it email? Is it text? Is it phone? What is that? And so many times we skip those. People think, oh, they'll figure it out. Well, maybe they're coming from a place that email was the norm. I can tell you in our organization, if you need, we actually say, you know what, if you need our attention, it's a text. If it's an emergency, it's a phone call. If you send an email, it's going to be 3 to 5 days before we probably respond.
Yeah.
And if you're used to someone who's like, like we use email as chat, that's not going to work in our organization.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's just not how we work. And so it's setting those norms.
And that comes right back to kind of where we started this conversation. If you didn't set norms and you're going into some sort of behavior conversation, it's likely that a lot of the problem is on you.
Yes.
So you got to be prepared to be like, it's my fault that I didn't communicate. And I think there are a lot of people who, come into a workplace, the norms weren't set. And the reason why they aren't maybe stepping up or giving ideas is because in their past experience, they were told that was not okay in one way, either explicitly or not explicitly. So if you didn't explicitly say and then reinforce repeatedly that I want everybody sharing their ideas no matter, what department you're from, like I always want ideas. Or if you didn't explicitly say, like, I may be the leader, but I want you to tell me if there's broccoli in my teeth, right? I'm not going to be mad, right? And you have to encourage that and not just say it once, but I think like repeat it, especially if it's not something that's typically found in a workplace. Yeah. So, but if you do that work of establishing the norms up front, then and somebody isn't doing it, they already had lots of warning, lots of training, and you can move through that process a lot faster.
Yeah. No, I love that. And we would tell you it's the 4 T's as a leader.
Okay, what are the 4 T's? Go ahead.
Is, have I told them what the norm or the expectation is? Have I trained them? Do they have the tools to be able to do it? And have they had enough time to learn it? Because some things I can learn right away. Some things it may take me some time to learn. And if I can go and say, yep, I've told them, and sometimes I need to say, have I told them a couple times? And have I trained them? And have I really trained them? Have I given them the tools that they need? Do they, have they given them enough time? If I can say yes to all of those, and I hold up the mirror and say, yep, I've done those, then it's really an accountability conversation. If I haven't, then it's a self-accountability conversation. I need to go train them. I need to tell them. I need to demonstrate this so they see what it is. Oh, I've never told them that we're supposed to use this font in all of our media. Oops.
Yeah.
That's on me.
We brought up accountability earlier and didn't dive into it, but I love that this has evolved, right? With those 3 T's, it's like, where's that? Who needs to be held accountable? It sounds like if you did all the 3 T's, they need to be held accountable. If you didn't, you need to hold yourself accountable. Yes. Yeah. That is really great wisdom. Well, our time has already come up. But Scott, tell us, what types of leaders should reach out to you, and what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, no, I love that. I think, I would tell you if you're looking at, hey, I would like to know more about how do I hire more effectively, or how do I have some of those difficult conversations, or I want to learn more about what is this assessment thing you're talking about? Absolutely reach out. You can grab us at our website, becomemoregp.com. You can email us. Our email is really easy, becomemore@becomemoregp.com.
I love it.
and absolutely, reach out. We'd love to have a conversation. And if you want to learn more, check out the website.
Excellent. Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Scott, and thank you for sharing all of your wisdom and clearly decades of experience. And thank you out there for tuning in and for everything that you do to make our communities better. I have a small favor to ask before you move on with your day. If you could take a moment to like and leave a review for this podcast wherever you're listening to it, and or share it with a friend or colleague who could benefit from these conversations. It is a win-win for those who need help in finding the information that will give them the resources they need. Until next time, take care of yourself, and remember, nonprofits are actually more complex than for-profits, but you can win that game of nonprofit whack-a-mole by working smarter, not harder.
You've been listening to Inspired Nonprofit Leadership. Thanks so much for tuning in. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single episode or the bonus episodes. And while you're at it, please leave a rating and review and be sure to share with your friends and colleagues. Tune in every week for more useful insights and wisdom on nonprofit leadership. Thanks so much for all you do for the communities you serve. Until next time, all the best.